Hello, welcome to Love Your Precious Life, our first episode. Today we're going to be talking about some holiday relationship issues and getting into some interesting topics related to that. If you're interested in anything that we talk today, please like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to be able to engage more with you in the comments section as well. So if there's anything that interests you, or if you have any experiences you'd like to share related to what we talk about, please start the conversation in the comments section and we would be glad to engage as well. I am joined by two lovely ladies, Dr. Angela McMahon and Kim Taylor, both therapists that have worked with me in the industry of addiction treatment, mental health, etc., for quite some time. And so, we wanted to talk about some specific relationship issues related to Christmas and the holidays and any other, things like that that may involve this sort of thing. So, without further ado, does anyone want to take on the first part?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we're talking about this topic is that, December 11th is actually the biggest breakup day of the year, of the entire year. And so, we want to take a look at some reasons why that is, what's going on in relationships and, what's leading to those breakups. And then also try and discuss some ways that people can prevent breakups during this time.
That's quite interesting. I would have assumed that the opposite would have been true, that a lot of people just have relationships throughout the holidays. So that was quite, intriguing to me to hear that December 11th specifically, and that time of year was actually the most breakups. So quite counterintuitive.
Yeah, it was shocking for me as well. Angela was the one that actually had been researching that a bit. And you want to talk about that, Ange?
Sure. I did my doctoral dissertation on romantic breakups and no contact, and I did a qualitative study. And while researching for the information for my dissertation, I happened to discover that Facebook was gathering data regarding when most people updated their status of their relationship. And as it turns out, the research ended up showing at the time that December 11th was the day that most people went through a breakup if they were going to go through a breakup during the year.
Right. Yeah, and it's pretty astounding. It's like, what are some of the reasons for that, right? And I think, it's a confusing time for some people. There's a lot of stress going on. And, one of the factors could be the fact that newer relationships, people who have just gotten together maybe within the last 3 to 6 months, they're coming into the holidays and they're trying to kind of define what is the status of the relationship. Um, are they going to get each other gifts? Are they going to go to each other's families' houses and introduce them to their families and or to their children even? So it's definitely kind of a confusing time that they have to figure that out.
And yeah,
relationships to the next level.
And you being a licensed therapist, you probably have come across a lot of relationship issues, obviously, and you're providing that direct care. So you're probably very familiar with this type of process. And Brian, with your male perspective and also being a counselor, it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think, just from a financial perspective, that can be another pressure. I think that more men may be prone to feeling the stress from. I have personally had friends that maybe have ended a relationship when they didn't have, a good enough job to maybe buy a gift for someone that they thought was important enough. Things like that. I think we put a lot on material weight, and typically that other person would rather just have that person. So they may be getting their heart broken for nothing. And the whole situation, is unfortunate because the lack of communication and the materialistic sort of aspect can definitely impact that. That's I guess what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the perceived expectation that my partner is going to want this for a gift or this dollar amount, and I'm not going to be able to meet that expectation. So out of um, maybe fear and pressure, there's the potential for breakups there.
Yeah, and it definitely seems like any relationship that is having stressors already, those stressors are going to be magnified at this time of year. And also trying to figure out if someone is going to go to see their spouse's family, which family members they see, and do they see both partners' families? Where are they at in the relationship? Is that even appropriate? I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of that as
Right.
well.
Or maybe your family is,
Yeah,
kind
absolutely.
of crazy, and you're trying to hide, the fact that you maybe have a dysfunctional family that may be a little tough to be around. So there may be several factors. I'm thinking, just knowing some situations that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying, Ange, I mean, if there's ongoing issues that haven't been resolved in the relationship, the last thing you want to do is take that into a family event situation, where it could be magnified 10 times over.
Yeah. And sometimes it feels like the right thing to do to just eliminate that stress is just to do the cutoff. And that's not always the best solution, but sometimes people panic and they jump to that. I've
Right.
I've seen some situations like that before.
Yeah. And
I also
social
think it's sort
media.
of, yeah, and I think it's, like you're saying that you're taking the relationship to another step or another level, basically, right before engagement or something like that. And so I think for some people, they're not ready or they're not willing to send that signal yet. They may be unsure of where the relationship is going to go. So I think it definitely challenges whether you believe there's longevity in that relationship, or how you may see that person.
Absolutely. And I think that's why communication is so important is talking through a lot of these things because a lot of it really is perception based and it's just what the one person is insinuating or, perceiving that the other person is feeling and it might not even be accurate. So being able to sit down and talk to your partner would be super important. What do you expect from the holiday?
Exactly. Exactly. And also and on the other side of that, giving them space. If you're starting to sense that that's causing them more anxiety, right, then they might go away even quicker. And so maybe also in certain situations, not pushing them and just giving them more space. And maybe that's all they need is space. But yes, communication is huge.
Yeah, I mean, people can have valid reasons for not wanting to introduce a new relationship to their family, especially children, if they're newly divorced. That can be a big step. And the holidays bring up a lot of emotion for a lot of people. Um, Maybe they have a lot of past memories of, people who have now passed on, or, there's just so many things that come up for people during the holidays. So to have some compassion and understanding probably for your partner being able to just communicate that and find out what's going on would be a huge step to not ending it for no particular reason really.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned in the beginning, I believe a lot of people, kind of from my perception, I actually saw a lot of people just getting into relationships just specifically through the holidays. I think for people that are single, it can be a time of year where that's amplified, and it may become a lot more challenging to deal with, or a lot more uncomfortable, I guess you could say. So that could also be on societal expectations, on all the movies and all the things that we sort of grow up with, that romance in that time of year is so important. But that was sort of my perspective until I had heard this study. So it was a little surprising. So at the same time that there's a lot of breakups, there's also a lot of people that maybe not for the best reasons are also getting into relationships. Can you guys talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of idealization based on social media. You see people, couples going out and having a good time or getting each other gifts and talking about all the things that they're going to do. So it is it can feel really isolating for people if they aren't in a relationship. So I can see, definitely people do sometimes seek having a partner during that time because they don't want to feel like they're, sitting home alone during the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah. And December 11th, I mean, it is right around the corner. And I know in discussing this, and some of the research was from years ago, some of it's a little bit more current. However, what I find the trend is that it's the same. Like, this is breakup season, whether it's 20 years ago or today. People change, the culture changes, everything changes, but the breakup season seems to stay the same. And I think it's because of these consistent stressors that come in the holiday season. And yes, some people do want to cuff, right? Give a shout out to my niece for telling me about cuffing, and what were the other ones? Pocketing.
Is that what the kids call it these days?
Breadcrumbing, freckling. Yes, cuffing is the winter season. I've learned, I've been educated about. And yes, for some people, cuffing is the way that they want to go. That's interesting to me. And I know that there wasn't really a word that we used to describe it when I was growing up. So that's a little bit new to me. That's not really a breakup, but it is still something that's a level of detachment.
Right, sort of a shallow way of getting through the season without really becoming involved too much, without really putting yourself out there too much.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about cuffing, Kim?
I mean, I think it's an interesting concept. I could see how that could happen. How a lot of people could, um, during the winter season. Is that what it is in particular?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's during the winter season. Yeah.
Carmen said.
Yeah. Are there statistics about age groups around that or no?
I didn't see any. There might be. That would be really interesting to figure that out. I would assume that it would be a younger crowd, kind of, because that's more of the dating scene. They're still dating at any age, of course, which is great. But definitely more people trying to figure that out around then and coming up with these unique terms.
Right, absolutely.
Which I love.
Yeah. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, everybody always thinks of the summer lovers, etc., but I think the winter lovers and that whole relationship, that may actually be where most of the action takes place. So it's very enlightening and interesting to hear both sides of this.
Yeah. And so in talking about breakups, right, because December 11th, again, is right around the corner. And that is the day that the study showed that more breakups happen than any other time of the year, in this particular season even. And then again in March, it spikes back up again around spring break, right? But in this particular case, it just seems like cuffing is just another way to detach. And maybe, I wonder what you guys think about this. I'm wondering about the theory of maybe someone breaks up with their spouse or their partner on December 11th, we'll say, right? And then they go into cuffing because maybe someone can't really let go. They're not able to detach. So they're like, I'll take the breadcrumbing you're giving me, which is cuffing. What do you guys think about that?
I was definitely curious as well, if all these people are breaking up, are they the ones that are then getting into a quick relationship for the holidays, or is it just kind of the people that were already in a relationship are getting out of one, and then the people that don't have one are the ones getting into it? That was kind of where I was wondering as well.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people feel like their family has an expectation as well, of who they're showing up with at the family event, or if they're showing up alone, right? And so they want to bring somebody, so they might end up bringing somebody new just so they have somebody there at the event, or someone that they think that their family would accept.
They date somebody clean cut that appears nice to the family just to look good as a whole appearance thing, possibly.
Right.
And the person that was super toxic that they really loved, that was abusive or drank too much or whatever, you know what I mean? It's the one that they're scared of bringing around. That could always be an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
in some situations, people, they abandon their own family that they love and maybe want to be with because they're afraid to not go with this other person to their family event. Not personal experience. And so then they go to try to make sure that they don't let go of the relationship, right? And maybe that relationship is showing signs of cracking anyway.
Right. Yeah. So it's also really a time of self-reflection too. It's like people start to think about, what do I want in the coming year? Now that this year's ending and we're going into a new year, what do they want
You're
for
open to
themselves, for
change.
their future? Is it time to make a change?
It's very true. Everybody gets gym memberships and all that stuff, right after the new year. And so that may be going along with that sort of, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to have the next year or the next holidays. I don't want to have this person there, et cetera. Or maybe I want a new relationship that, that we're going to start at that point. But I think that sounds like it may be accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to this. And some people might even be in denial that it's even happening. And that's kind of a scary place to be because I feel like the pain is just so much greater when it actually happens and you're forced to face it or become a stalker.
Right. Yeah. Or become a stalker. Yeah. And I mean,
Only
I think
Santa's
that's like
allowed to come
really,
down the chimney.
yeah. And people need to communicate with each other. And if they can't communicate about these issues, then that's saying something about the relationship as well. If you can't sit down and talk to your partner about the expectations without getting really upset or getting offended, that's something you have to
And I
take a
think
look at
it's
as well.
Yeah, and I think it's become harder for the newer generations as we become more introverted and social media dependent, and a lot of people maybe don't have as much time socializing in person as they used to, et cetera. I think that can. There's a lot, like I've seen younger people have fights through text and make up
Mhm.
and break up and all that stuff, just all through text. So we're definitely,
Mhm.
and there's only so much that you can convey in text, and there can be a lot of miscommunications also through text. So I think it's
Mhm.
important to actually have conversations with people and to be able to open up, but that takes trust. And so a lot of this
Right.
stuff is formative, and if you're not with the right person, or if that person is also just figuring it out, they may hurt you inadvertently. So it's always a process. We're always learning, but at the end of the day, hopefully we improve and make a better decision after each painful experience.
Yeah. And that's such a good point about not texting when you're angry or having discussions because the
Oh, the
misinterpretation is
waiting
so
period.
strong.
Yeah.
Oh, they
The
put all
emotion.
caps, so they're
Oh my
mad,
gosh.
Yeah.
and, therefore I'm going to
Yeah.
just yell back. It's got to be like at a
If you would have
minimum
just
over the
waited 20
phone.
minutes or 2 hours, you probably would have said anything like that. It was all emotion based. And then the person
Right.
thinks that's what you really mean, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that can be, and with the differences between men and women, as opposed, women typically being a little more emotional, and the men maybe reading things more logically, may not interpret it correctly, et cetera. So there's that aspect of miscommunication as well with the two sexes.
Have you guys
Yeah.
seen that
Traditional
meme?
relationships.
Do you guys know that meme that's all, he's a jerk, he's awful, I hate him, I can't stand him. Oh, wait, never mind, he just texted me back. When you're sitting there
Exactly.
waiting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think that's
that's
hilarious.
so true.
We're all
Yeah.
in our own sort of worlds and projecting from that experience. And I think, that's important to remember, but that's where the communication problems, especially if somebody doesn't really understand how to be empathetic or doesn't really have that kind of insight yet, if they're younger, et cetera. And just in general, a lot of people don't have that type of, conscious awareness of what everyone else is thinking, or how they may be thinking it, or where they're coming from. So I think you're very correct in the
Right.
communication aspect.
Definitely. And not making assumptions about, oh, she or he obviously doesn't want to take me to meet the family because they're embarrassed of me. Well, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's that they're embarrassed that their aunt's going to be drunk and making a scene, or their stepdad's going to hit on you or something. I mean, it could be something totally different. So that's why the communication, I think, is so important too, because we
Such
can
a good
easily
point.
make assumptions.
So when do you recommend that these conversations start? Like, is it when, if you do it really early, like, the beginning of December? Do you do it on December 11th when you're getting broken up with, or do you do it after it's already, like, when do you think it's an appropriate time to have this type of conversation? When you're sensing it?
I mean, I think probably early on in December. You know, a lot of people like to plan things out way in advance with their families and everything else, and the stress starts. So, you know, I guess it depends on the couple. I don't know what you think, Brian.
I would think that that's, at least from my perspective, that may be a decision that's not even talked about, but is already made before you even get to that point. It may not be something that the conversation would change either way. You've sort of already made your mind up whether you want to take that person or not, or whether you're staying with them or not. But I would say that, yeah. So communication wise, if you started communicating a little sooner, for sure, like the relationship and how it's built, I think it would go back to the foundation of, you know, how you've communicated through that relationship, et cetera. So, you know, if that's just beginning, or if you're already at a problem with it, then, you know, that may be something else, but definitely just try to be as communicative as you can. But that's also a challenge because, you know, when you're too open and honest about things, sometimes that can scare people away a bit. So maybe you're feeling like you do start to love someone, but don't want to say it right away. And I think that's sometimes a smart tact, depending on the situation, to at least have some restraint, know that your emotion is, you know, kicking in. And, you know, but that being said, when you're both in love and at that same point, if you're lucky enough to be, you know, on that same level, then you're both texting constantly, and, you know, you're sort of in that mode. So I think it all depends, and you have to, it's a case by case basis, you know, on what's best for that relationship. But definitely communication, and the more of it, is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if there's if there's conflict, ongoing conflict in a relationship, it would be important also to talk about, like, hey, when we go to my mom's house or whatever, let's not bring up any issues. Let's try and, you know, keep that between us. And so not, you know, that way there doesn't become an explosion, or, you know, nothing.
You're getting ahead of it.
Made that much worse.
Yeah, and maybe another thing is to let someone know before December 11th, hey, I don't care if you don't have enough money to get me something really nice. I'm glad to be with you. And I don't care if you have a really crazy family or whatever. I've seen it all. And, you know, I'd be happy to just spend the holiday with you no matter what happens. So I think that's that communication again of and expectations and things. But, you know, from a male perspective, I think a lot of the men that I've known that may have broken up for financial reasons, all that, if they would have heard that and kind of, you know, known that, they may have approached it differently, and who knows, they could still be together today. So it's, you know, it's unfortunate that sometimes things don't work out in those situations. But I think as long as we're increasing our communication and things like that, we're going to have better outcomes in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you do if somebody does want the expensive gift and they feel like that is something that they should be receiving?
I mean, I think you kind of have to evaluate, you know, what are the values in the relationship, right? So if someone's putting an expectation, like, I want this car for a gift, or, you know, whatever it is, right? I want this Gucci bag or whatever. I mean, you kind of have to look at assessing the values of the relationship as well. Like, what is this relationship?
And is there any manipulation going on in that relationship?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, for, you know, oftentimes I've seen people sort of bought with things, maybe somebody that's out of their league, or, you know, younger or whatever, you know, that can be a factor where they're sort of using them to get expensive things, and may not have the best intentions, et cetera, but that person is, you know, sort of all in love with them, et cetera. So I've seen that dynamic as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just don't take out a bunch of credit card debt to try to make
don't buy them a car.
Happy. Don't buy them a car if you're not low on it.
No
Yeah, like the commercials. Okay, so what happens now? I have so many questions. What happens now if December 11th, right, or somewhere around there, this season, someone gets broken up with? What happens then? They're being told, I don't want this relationship anymore.
Well, then they're going to go to cuffing and find somebody temporary to
what
help,
if they uncuff? They threw the cuffs away. You're right, though. That could definitely happen.
Well,
And
I would say
Yeah.
everybody has their own way of grieving. Me personally, if I got broken up with somebody that I was actually in love with, there'd be no way I could just date again. That's just how I'm built. But I've known a lot of women that have felt so destroyed by that situation that they were able to get with someone right away just to sort of ease their pain. And so I think it's what works for you, and sort of and there's there doesn't need to be any judgment if you're not built like that, because I made that mistake when I was younger. And I think we all have different strokes for different folks, but we all sort of do relationships differently, and so it's finding someone that can be compatible with your values and what you're looking for.
But you don't want to compound the negative, right? So maybe, I mean,
Good point.
in some cases, going out and finding someone else. What's that saying? Under someone or whatever. You know what that's saying? The best way to get over someone is to get under someone or whatever.
Oh,
Under
right,
someone new.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And obviously I don't know that well, but that sometimes can cause more issues,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, so you're delaying all of
loneliness.
right. And then your grieving process and everything else kind of gets stunted, I would say. But at the time, it may be a much better alternative than going through the holidays brokenhearted by yourself. So, I mean, I can't blame anyone that would make that choice, especially during that time.
And it's also an opportunity to kind of go internal too, because it, you can almost turn it around through the healing process of looking at it. I mean, of course, it's super painful, but also it can be an opportunity to go, well, you know what, maybe this person isn't right for me, and try and work through those grieving steps and approach the new year with a fresh outlook. I mean, it's really hard to do. I know as girls, a lot of times we get with our girlfriends when there's a breakup, and we provide a lot of support for each other. And so, reaching out to friends and family, super important. And guys really need that too. A lot of times they're isolated, and they're hurting just as much when there's a breakup, but
I'm probably less willing to communicate about that just through, sort of having to maintain that tough guy persona. And I would say we usually don't have the connection with our families in the same way to where we'd be talking to our families through the holidays about our breakup, et cetera. So I think that may put guys in a different position where they're going out with the guys a little bit more, et cetera, just as females would go out with their girlfriends.
yeah.
And I think in some situations, like for example, when I was pitching my idea of the no contact rule to the International Review Board, the IRB, for my dissertation, and I said that I wanted to interview people that had gone through a recent breakup and for them to do no contact, the IRB's biggest concern was the risk that the participants would be in without having contact of the other person, because you're in such a vulnerable state. So the reason why I'm bringing this up, because I'm curious what you guys think about the people that have the reaction of, I can't live without that other person. I'm going to die. I've been stressed before about breakups, right, Brian? Kim, and it does help having friends. Like, you guys have been amazing, and you guys are amazing friends. And I totally agree. Sometimes being alone helps. Sometimes being with your friends help. But I think the important part is to always maintain hope that things are going to get better. What do you guys think for the person who struggles in that way?
I mean, I think a really good resource would be, especially now, you can connect with online therapy, so maybe even just doing a couple sessions just to process through some of it. Even if someone's not in therapy, seek a therapist just to kind of talk it through. But yeah, it's so hard. It's compounded during the holiday season. So definitely, I think being careful not to isolate too much, being careful not to head into substances, because it can make it that much worse. Once they start drinking, and then just ruminating the relationship, it can get pretty dark. So
Yeah.
I think avoiding the substances is probably a big one.
Good point. And since we all work in substance use disorder treatment, we understand that world pretty well. It can be very devastating. place for someone to be in. And people drink more at the holidays in general, usually anyway, or party harder. And so that's a really good point. And also reaching out for
But
therapy.
I mean, and definitely reaching out, and saying, hey, I just went through a major breakup, I'm suffering a little bit, but I want to, I want to get out. I want to see you guys. I want to be around my friends, that kind of stuff too. Not being in denial, like, oh yeah, everything's fine.
I'm going to cuff.
Whatever.
Right. I'm going to start cuffing.
Well, and I would mention that it's, if you're feeling like you just can't live without that other person and you're going to all these extremes to where it's life or death and such a serious thing that may also, indicate that the person is maybe younger and more mature or has some other sort of issues going on. I would say as you get older and you go through more of this, it becomes easier. If you think of your first relationship, it's always the most intense and you always sort of think that it's going to last forever. And, we all go through this, but some people, are still maybe a little bit older than others. And so, not to judge them at where they're at, but I think we need to understand what a healthy sort of dealing with these situations looks like compared to, what it looks like when you're really unhealthy. And I think, like you mentioned, Kim, getting help when you're feeling that, when it's that extreme, where you're thinking about maybe hurting yourself, or when you're thinking about, I can't live without this other person, that there's no one that can ever, we all feel a little bit of that to some degree, but it's, when it gets extreme or when it gets to be affecting your life, there can be some help with that. And once we get through the other side of that, we see, a lot more clearly that, and that, eventually we realize that person wasn't the one that we were meant to be with forever, et cetera. So a lot of times it's just getting them through that crucial period that I think is the key.
So you're saying not to beg,
100%.
No begging, no over texting.
Yes.
Well, talking about no contact, I think when you chase, it makes people run from, a male perspective. So that's something that, when you're just like we were talking about, how when you don't want to send a text right away when you're emotional, I would use the same sort of formula of waiting as long as you can, and trying to just, make sure that you're making really clear decisions and limiting the communication to not chase that person away, unnecessarily when you're just trying, because that's where the emotion versus, the how it's coming across can be different between the two.
Yeah, and I think, just giving the person space too, because you don't necessarily know that it's forever, right?
100%.
You can be broken up and the person could be calling you 2 days later to get back together. So probably staying away from your phone, putting it away, trying to stay a little bit away from social media, maybe going out, getting in nature, taking some walks, being around friends. Things change frequently, and it doesn't mean that it's over forever. And so
give them that
not to
space
get into
to
a
miss
really
you.
dark place. What's that?
Give them that space to miss you. That's a really good point. Like that rubber band effect, right? It stretches out and then it can bounce back. But if you don't let it stretch out, it's not going to bounce back so easily. And also,
absence
I do
makes
want
the
to
heart
say,
fonder.
Right? And I also want to say, regarding the IRB saying that it was a risk to ask someone not to contact someone after they have been broken up with, I actually argue that it's the opposite. I feel like if you're contacting someone pretty regularly after you've been broken up with, you are risking being re-traumatized if it was traumatizing ending the relationship. There's a risk of being rejected again and again. And I feel like it's actually better to provide that space for that reason.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Give them the space for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because just continuing to reach out is just going to make that person typically, that much more convinced that they made the right decision. Right? They're just going to.
Absolutely. When there's a silence, then all they have is their own sort of process to consider and to think about. And oftentimes their mind will change on how they were thinking about stuff just by having the silence and the time to actually come to a conclusion, instead of it being forced by a behavior that they see constantly happening.
Right. And maybe they're just being triggered from something from the past, that,
Absolutely.
that they're having to work through on their own. It could be the holidays bring up all kinds of sad memories, whatever it is. So yeah, I definitely think just giving them
so
space.
here's one I've heard a lot. I would love to hear what you guys think. It's Christmas Day, though. Can't I just reach out? They just broke up with me on December 11th or whatever day. Can I contact them on Christmas Day? What do you guys think?
I've seen a lot of fights over that.
I could
because
see that.
people do that. I have definitely seen people that are in a new relationship, and that's the day that they get the text because that's the one day that that person feels like it's okay. And I've seen it cause major problems because sometimes the phone's sitting there and the new partner sees it, whatever. But it can, I can say it can definitely backfire. And so definitely be careful because it's all depending on the situation. But
why would they think it's okay on that day?
Because I think out of all of the days of the year, especially, that's kind of the most that you kind of have to text your loved ones, etc. So I personally have, people that I had recently broken up with, I wanted communication with them and got a little text from them on like Christmas. And I'm like trying to text back, but no, they were just being nice, so I've had to go both ways. So sometimes it's not absolutely, but it's, but whether they're getting back with you or not, unfortunately, it's sometimes just that day of the year that people will send a text like that. So
I see.
I think that.
So instead, I should just get really pretty and post something and hope that they see it or hear about it on my social media, right?
That sounds kind of passive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, good. That's great way to communicate indirectly.
Right, passive communication, right?
But yeah, I mean, you control what you can control, and if it makes you feel better, especially.
Yeah, but you might not necessarily get the outcome that you want by doing that. And if they're coming back because they saw you looked pretty on a post, really, that's why they're coming back? I don't know.
I can say honestly, out of all the guy friends, I've never heard of them ever like, oh, I got with this girl because she looked pretty in some post online like that I already knew. It's not
but
like
they liked it. But they liked the photo.
Yeah, they may like it, but it's.
I put out a feeler and you accepted. You felt it.
And that's a lot of that too is reading into the meaning of it, right? Like, oh, they like the photo, therefore, they want to get back together. No, maybe they just like the photo because they're just,
And that
I think that's where men and women are in two different worlds on that. Like the men don't realize how important it is to the women on that, and the women are like getting so much like self-esteem and other things from that whole interaction, and it tells them so much about how they think, and the guy's like zero, like literally clueless that any of that's going on, honestly.
Well, the girl's over here with her girlfriend and she's like, he likes the photo, he's not contacting me though, maybe if I post another one then I'll get the phone call, so then all of a sudden you have like 5 that you posted and now you're just
he's like, oh my god, she posted another one, she's probably hoping I see this. Oh gosh.
She exposed it.
Yeah, she did it just for me.
Yeah, right. 100%.
I mean, when you're trying to I think so. If you do it too much, that's where the balance is important. If you're doing it too much, it becomes obvious and then it's unattractive. So it's really all about the balance, and that's it's not easy. The more unhealthy you are, I think the harder it is to find that balance because, having, sort of a distance and healthy boundaries and all that stuff can go a long way as far as being attractive to people. But I think men specifically like to feel like they're conquering, or maybe it's like our caveman roots. So we're it's like we're hunters. We like to not have just like easy prey. We want to like we felt like we accomplished something. We took something. So that may be why people get with other people that are married, etc. In an unhealthy way. But at the end of the day, we have to have, there has to be some level of in dating or whatever of give and take in that, and it can't just all be like, okay, I love you 100%, or that's kind of unattractive to a man. So it's an interesting dynamic.
And I think a way to get grounded too is to come back to, what do I have control over? I don't have control over the person that broke up with me. I don't have control over what they're doing or thinking or perceiving, right? So I can only control myself. And so it goes back to, how's my self-care? Am I taking good care of myself? Am I practicing gratitude? Am I exercising? Trying to go back to like basics, like what are the basic things that help us with our own mental health? Because it's so easy to start ruminating and obsessing And once that starts, then you start looking at their page or whatever. And I think that's another important thing is if somebody breaks up with you, don't go stalking their page. As hard as it is to not do, you don't want to go checking out their page and see who they're with and what's happening,
So
as much as
triggering.
possible. I mean, I know it can be hard, but
that's how you figure out like who they're with now is who's
it's
liking their
dating now,
posts.
yeah,
Didn't you know that?
right?
Oh
Really,
my gosh.
that's
But if you look at their page and you see that person with
see,
another
you know the
person, you're
formula.
like, yeah, I know.
Oh,
right?
then you
When
know
you
for
create
sure.
a fake account and then you
But when
go
you see
and
it's like a new person that's all of a sudden
Start
starting to
stalking
like
them.
their stuff,
right. And then
you're
you
like,
see that they're with someone else and it looks like they're moving on so quickly. Oh my gosh, I have had so
That's
many
harsh.
times where
Yeah.
friends have been broken up with and then they see
Mhm.
their person with someone else and they're like, do you think they're going to get married? And I'm like, oh my gosh, first of all, you don't even know
And
if they're
really, that
dating.
person's just hurting and trying to hurt that person back, probably. Half the
Yeah.
time, I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they break up 6 months later, or maybe
Or
they
Oh
weren't
yeah,
even
because it's the
dating at all.
rebound.
it's her cousin and you didn't even know. You thought it was
Yeah,
an
right.
her cousin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, but that's a
exactly.
good rebounds are definitely a thing to be aware of that you're not going to be in a good situation to actually have, even if they are a good person for you, you're probably not going to, the relationship's just not going to work out because you weren't in the right place coming out of a previous breakup, especially if it was long term, especially
Weren't we
divorce,
just talking
etc.
about rebounds, or was
Mhm.
that different? What you were saying at the beginning?
A little different, but it kind of led
Okay,
into
how's it different? How's it different?
well, I mean, I guess it's the same.
Oh, okay. So it can have pros and cons, it sounds like, depending on the person.
What's that?
Yeah, for sure.
Because Brian was saying before that it's okay to maybe go out and what were you saying, Brian? Maybe I should let you
Mhm.
speak.
To do a
Um,
rebound date with somebody new.
And maybe have a
I mean, there's
fling.
so many factors involved.
yeah, we were talking about basically that for some people it may be my what I was saying that was different was that for some people it may be so painful. I was also trying to kind of not project, because I used to kind of judge women that I have dated that were immediately with someone else afterwards as kind of like, that it was a character flaw or something immoral, sort of, so to speak. But I think now, looking at it from maybe a female perspective that I didn't really have, they may be in so much pain because they're so much more of an emotional person than a man, etc. And they may be so hurt that may be how they cope with it best. I've seen people do it in different ways, and so I think everybody sort of grieves in their different ways. So it's case by case basis. But that being said, if it's a rebound, it's not going to work out most likely. And so that's what I've seen be a kind of a problem with that is that you may find the right person afterwards, or a really good person that you may have had a future with, but you're just not in a good place, and you're going to kind of screw it up. You're going to not treat that person right, and you're going to end up breaking up them just because you're kind of still going through your own stuff. And then a couple of years later, when you're like, oh, that person was great. I wish I wouldn't have screwed that up. So sometimes I personally had revelations like that. And hindsight is always 2020. But so I think it's very if you could avoid the rebound by all means, don't do it, because I think it is unhealthy to some degree, and it's a bad coping strategy, just like doing any other kind of unhealthy coping strategy. But I didn't want to be too judgmental either, because I know no matter what, people are going to be doing that, especially when they're younger.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think part of it too is if you do go out with someone else, the potential for getting back together, it could definitely backfire, right? Depending on the nature of the relationship with the person that you're going out with, and say that person that you were with and you were in love with finds out about it, that could be a hindrance.
Yeah, the saying is exes are exes for a reason, or something like that. But I've definitely seen that where people try to, maybe at the holidays, et cetera, when they've been separated for a while, and it seems kind of nice, but then pretty quickly you'll find out with a couple of weeks or a couple of months that it's not going to work in those situations a lot of times. But but I guess
I agree.
Individualized,
case by case.
Very true.
Yeah.
And some people mature, like some people were married and then divorced, and then 20 years later, when they both, they get back together and they're like way happier because they had grown differently or whatever. So you never know how it's going to work out. But
And even if your ex does go and marry someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to last. Like, look at Britney Spears, what she did with that guy in Vegas, which went to high school.
yeah, and most likely when you get on the other
day.
side of it, you'll feel different about whether you wanted to spend and you'll be actually glad that that person's out of your life, and you'll be happier with the situation that you're in, or at least happy that you're not still feeling that way.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
lots of different options, lots of different things to look at. Being introspective
absolutely.
sounds like it's one of the most important pieces.
And not isolating. Don't isolate.
Not isolating.
Super important. Reach out if you need help. Talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So important.
Very important. Well, I guess this can conclude our first episode podcast. If you have any personal stories you'd like to share, please comment below and like, share, and subscribe if you're interested in anything we've talked about. And we will have another episode for you quite soon.
Yeah, they keep getting better from here.
Absolutely. All right. Have a good
Happy
night.
holidays.
Bye.